Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome, folks, to The Hungry Gamer is back with another mini, almost, review. And today we are talking about Folklore, the Affliction from Greenbrier Games. Now, I say this is sort of a mini review because I actually did a whole honkin' full-on review with the rules overview. Unfortunately, I had the wrong mic turned on. And so I spent all this time, and usually, you may or may not know this, but recently I've switched over to where I do the audio and the video separate, and I put them together at the end, and the audio I have connected right to the computer through the mic, and it sounds just much better than it did when the mic was connected directly to the camera. And unfortunately, I left the computer mic on, and so it just sounds like trash. And I just am slammed with work. I'm slammed all over the place, and I just don't have the time to set it all back up and do it all again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of talk this through, a little bit of how the game works, and I'm going to pull in some of the footage where it kind of matches up. So we're kind of in between a mini review and a full-on review. So sorry about that. Also, it means when I get to the final thoughts, I'm magically going to have longer hair and a different shirt on. At least I think I'm going to have longer hair. I don't remember if I got the haircut just after I recorded or just before I recorded, so I don't know. Maybe I'll have longer hair. I'm definitely going to be wearing different clothes and have less of a beard, I think. Anyhow, let's go through and talk about Folklore, the Afflictions. Folklore is a dungeon crawler adventure style game. And some would argue it's more adventure because I actually haven't gone into many dungeons. A lot of the combats you do are out of the dungeon, but not the point. And this is kind of a gothic world where you're dealing with vampires and werewolves. It kind of has that gothic vibe theme to it. Now, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be selecting your characters, and each of these characters is going to have their own little story book. It's not really a story book, but their own little booklet that's going to have a bunch of unique things that they can purchase, and their own unique stats and abilities and all that kind of stuff, and their own level up path. And you can actually see those right here. And I got the Exorcist here. You'll see the Exorcist has two different paths there, some information about them. On the inside, starting gear, all the special things you can do at the different locations. And then here on the back, its own unique leveling up that you can do. But you'll pick your adventures, and you'll be going through a storybook. And each one's going to be broken down between two different types of gameplay. You have the kind of the world overview map where you're going to be moving around. You might be moving around along the road, or you might be going off-road. Either way, after each move, each turn you take, which is either just going to be a single step if you're going off-road, or depending on your stride, that many kind of triangles along the road, you're going to have an event. Now, if you're on the road, it's going to be determined whether it's day or night, and if it's day or night, that's going to change what type of event you're going to be dealing with. And the cards are going to tell you specifically what happens and what kind of test you might need to do to take damage or find something or whatever it may be. And as you can guess, usually at night, they're going to be worse than they're going to be during the day. Now, if you're going off-road, you're going to have two different choices of what it is that you'd rather do. And again, each one, when you flip the card over, is going to tell you what happens. And it might be you just get something, it might be a test that you have to do, etc., etc. But it's going to be based on the stats that your characters have, and each character is going to start with different stats, and you'll be able to build up different stats as you go through. And no matter what kind of test you're doing, you're going to be rolling a d10 to do that, and going for high numbers. And in general, a good skill, you might add 2 or 3 to your roll. The other thing that's going to happen is sometimes you're going to be playing through the game, going through the story, and it's going to say, have an encounter, which is going to be you're going to lay out a couple of tiles onto the board and put your standees, or if you have the minis out there, and you're actually going to do a more traditional dungeon crawl that we all know and love. Now, in this particular core box, the thing you see on the left, that kind of initiative tracker, doesn't come with it. That's something that I purchased and added on with the Fall of the Spire expansion, because it just gives a little more complexity to how the combat is handled. But in the core box, either all the bad guys are going to go, then all the heroes are going to go, or vice versa. This initiative tracker that you add in kind of allows, well, bad guys to go, good guys to go, and then it also is adding on to that, it's adding a little bit of if you're on the exact same location as one of the hero abilities that are out there, or the bad guys are in the exact same position that one of the foe abilities is, it's going to be some kind of bonus that the good guys or the bad guys are going to get, and you can kind of move up and down that tracker a little bit. But in general, in combat, you're simply going to be taking your turn, you're going to be moving about, you might be interacting with different spots on the board, and then you're going to be making an attack. When you're making your attack, it's going to be a nice and simple D100 roll. And you're going to have your bonuses you're going to add on, and you're going to then compare that to the defensive value of the bad guy and slowly whittling down their health. They'll be whittling down your health. You're going to be using your abilities that you have with your power points. You might be using potions or whatever it is that you have. You're going to be shooting. You're going to be running out of ammo and so on and so on. More traditional dungeon crawl fare, where on your turn you're going to be using your abilities. You're going to be attacking and moving around. There's a little bit of tactical play that goes into there as well. However, in between those two things, there's also the skirmishes, which are you're going to flip over the card of the bad guy, and on the other side, it's just a simple skirmish where you're still going to do a fight. You're going to roll the dice, you're rolling your D100s, you're taking hits, you're making attacks, and so on, but what you're not doing is all the tactical combat. It's just a very quick, you damage them, their stat goes down, and they are actually hurting you as you go through the game and giving you different afflictions and things like that that, may be good or bad. Usually they're going to be bad, just coming from the bad guys. And really, that's kind of the core of what's going on. But you're going to be playing through these scenarios, and each of them kind of chains together, and sometimes you'll have something that happens to you that will give you a story mark, which means later on it's going to say, if you have this story mark, this thing happens. Or, as the one that I just recently played, what might happen is it's going to say, did you kill this thing in this way earlier scenario? The answer is yes. Here's a thing that happens. The answer is no, a different thing happens. So it all kind of comes together as you're playing through this with a little bit of choose your own adventure that is within a larger scenario narrative, which is all tied into a larger book narrative. So that's kind of the core of what's going on here. So what do I like about this game? The first thing that I like is there is some serious depth to the gameplay here. And what I mean by that is there are tons of ways that you are able to customize your character. And by that I mean each one of your characters, as I said, has these little booklets here with two different paths you can start on. But inside, not only that, there's all these different things that you're able to get that are unique to that character. And then as you're building on the back, you have all these different things you're able to build up with as well. And I think what it does is it keeps it very simple to do, but at the same time, you really are able to start making some interesting choices with your different characters that you're playing, and I think that does really work well. The next thing that I really like is, all in all, the game is very compact. Now, it's possible that in some of the expansions, the maps get bigger and bigger, but having almost finished the core campaign, I will say that I have the map board out, the kind of the world map, and I have that I use that regularly. That's always out. And then I just put the other adventure tiles on top of that, and it stays contained in there. It's a very small footprint for a dungeon crawling type game. It's not a tiny footprint, but considering what it is, it's relatively small, and I really like that. It also makes for setup in between world map phase and big combat phase much, much quicker and simpler than it is in a lot of other games, allowing you to sit down and kind of play through multiple scenarios in one sitting, which I really, really like. I also particularly like the way there are the skirmish fights, which you're still using your ability, you're still rolling the dice, but it's a little more cinematic in your mind of what's going on and much faster. Because again, like I just said, it keeps the game moving at a rate that I like. I like to be able to play the game and fly through something very, very quickly. Along with that, I like how the story choices work. I have found that in many cases, it really does make for an interesting, lasting choice as you choose your own adventure. You go through, you get a story mark. That story mark might not matter until 3 fights later when somebody says, oh, does anyone have the green story mark? Well, you just got this negative, or, well, you just got this bonus, or whatever it is. And I think that also works really, really well. And then the last thing that I want to point out that I like is I do like the relative simplicity of the combat, because there's not a ton of things you can do in combat. You can move, you can do an attack, or you can interact. There's other things. You can use a ritual or whatever, but for the most part, that's all it is that you're able to do, and it does keep the game moving. And along with that, there's always hard choices to be made. So there's the little investigation points where you're going to investigate those. You might investigate it and get hurt. You might investigate it and get an item. You just don't know what's going to happen because it's going to come down to the roll of the die. So it really makes you have to decide, is it worth it to me to take myself out of the fight here to go get this thing that might just hurt me and leave my companions kind of alone to do what they need to do by themselves? So it does make for some interesting choices there as well. And then the real last thing that I like is I like the way the road and off-road events work, and I like how it's broken down to day and night. So as you're moving, you kind of suddenly have these choices that you're making of, do I want to take the quicker path, which is going off-road, but I know those events are harder and more dangerous, or do I want to go the other way and take the longer path, but the events are going to be a little bit easier to manage, unless of course maybe it's nighttime, so it's harder. And so there's these interesting choices that keep the world map traveling interesting as well, but they don't take up a ton of time. You can kind of see what I'm getting to here is that I want to take a lot of time when I'm doing the big battles. I don't want to take a lot of time when I'm doing the events. I don't want to take a lot of time when I'm doing the skirmishes. And right now, the way the game is built, that is what happens. And then the real last thing I'm going to say that I like is I like how with all the different status effects that can be put on you, and there are a lot of them, I like that you can resist all of them, and each of your characters have more likelihood of doing that based on the skills that they have, and I like that. One of the things that I really don't like about Gloomhaven is status effects, they just get put on you. Even if the attack misses, you just get a status effect. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, I like that in this game, if there's status effects that really scare you, that you really don't like, you can build up those skills. You can have those skills to help mitigate the chance that you get those abilities. And I think that just is really, really well done. So what are my quibbles with the game? My first quibble is I think you need to have the Fall of the Spire expansion. And that is so you have the more advanced initiative combat system. Is it a huge difference? No, it's not a huge difference, but I think that difference of now suddenly you can have heroes and bad guys kind of going back and forth as they go down this initiative track, I think that is a significant upgrade over the base game. And along with that, I think the foe tactics and hero tactics that are on that board add for a really interesting dynamic as you're deciding, well, I'm kind of close to the spot where I could use this tactic. Do I want to just go ahead and spin that PowerPoint and get there? Because PowerPoints are really, really valuable. But, ooh, it's worth it because that's a really cool initiative tactic that's there that's going to give you a big bonus. And I think that works really well, and I think it does overall, without adding a lot of complexity and time and fiddle, make combat significantly better. But that means you need to get that expansion also. So that's one thing I'll put out there. The next thing I'll put out there is, I don't know the math, but the D100 system feels really swingy. And I have no idea if it is any more swingy than a D20 or a D10 or whatever, but it feels that way. And it feels a little anticlimactic when you buy an ability that says +2 might. You're like, yeah! Oh, that's literally 2% more chance I'm going to hit. And so it feels a little anticlimactic. And along with that, in combat, it does sometimes devolve into the feeling like you're just, okay, well, I'm going to do my attack, they're going to do their attack, bop, 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 bop. And it loses some of the dynamism that I think the game wants to have. Does it happen all the time? No. And I think what usually avoids that is, more often than not, fights are quick, so you don't feel like you're getting into a slog. Though I will say sometimes with the Affliction fights, I just did one recently where it did just feel like that. It was just me hitting, them hitting back and forth, and there wasn't really anything going on. And was it not fun? No, I still enjoyed it, but it was starting to get into a slog, so just something to be aware of. And the next thing is, at least in the core game, as I pointed out earlier, I love that you have these things in here that you're able to buy that are unique to your character, but the problem is, there's no card for it. So you're just kind of supposed to remember that you have it or kind of flip this thing open and look at it. And I just think that's a miss. It's just a bummer. I have all these cards of all the pictures and stuff on there. They're small little cards, but then suddenly I have to remember that I have this other thing. Which is going to kind of dovetail me into the next thing. There's a lot of bookkeeping in this game. so very much. There's a whole big page that you're tracking everything that you have. And in fact, when I play the game, there's so many different modifiers and bonuses and blah, 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 blah. I have to take all kinds of notes, and I have them all right here. So, for example, I simply take characters, and I have these little dry erase cards, and I just put all this stuff on there, and I drop it on top of the character sheet, just so I have everything there. It's all the bonuses put in there. But that means I've been playing through a game with 3 different characters, so that means I have 3 of them. That's a lot of stuff on there that I'm tracking. It makes it a little faster, but I'm having to track all these. Then because I bought some of the character-specific items, then I have things like this, because I have this special crossbow that I bought where there's no card, so I have this crossbow right here, and I have them tracking that. And then, of course, I bought the kukri for my Avenging Madman, and I bought the Fenestrated Morningstar for my other guy. So now I have both of these things that I also have on there. And then as I'm trying to constantly track the changing lore and the changing gold that you get after every single fight and every single skirmish, you get something. And of course I have this thing here. So now I have all these different things that I'm putting on top of what is already out there, on top of a pretty in-depth campaign tracking sheet, which just means it's a lot. There's a lot that you're keeping track of. Now, I actually find this kind of rewarding. I'm enjoying it. That's why I'm doing it. But it might be more than you are looking to do at any given time. But really, that's it, folks. I think I've put a lot of thought into things I like and things that maybe might rub you the wrong way into this one. And I've talked a lot about it. But here's the thing. I think this is a good game. I think this is a game that if the things that I've said are things that I like, or things that excite you. And at the same time, if the things that I said maybe will rub you the wrong way, like all the bookkeeping, isn't something that's going to bother you, then I think this is a game you need to check out. See, because here's the thing, the story is pretty good. And it's not that expensive because the core box, you're getting standees, which keeps the price way down. It keeps the size of the box down. And so it's actually a pretty economical dungeon crawl that has a lot to it, a good amount of depth, and there's a whole bunch of different expansions that you can get. And as I said, you probably want to get the Fall of the Spire anyway, so then you have a lot of hours for not a ton of money. And I think when you're looking at a game, again, that has a pretty darn good story, it has interesting mechanics, it has some unique mechanics to it, I think for any dungeon crawl person, it's worth checking out if those details of bookkeeping and D100 swinginess aren't going to bother you. So there you have it, folks. That is Folklore, the Affliction. If I made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments with the timestamp so I can get that into the Klingon subtitles. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.